A homeless man had just stolen $82 million in broad daylight from the Federal Reserve, and now he sat trapped like a rat in a storm drain, listening to police boots echo above his head. Victor Santos pressed his back against the cold concrete pipe. The duffel bags containing more money than most countries' GDP squeezed beside him in the narrow space that reeked of sewage and shattered dreams. Red and blue lights painted the tunnel entrance, while helicopter rotors chopped the air overhead. America's most wanted criminal was now America's most cornered animal. He'd spent 3 years planning every detail, calculated every variable, anticipated every possible scenario, yet something had gone catastrophically wrong in the final 10 minutes of the operation. The homeless man who'd just pulled off the heist of the century sat in his own filth, replaying those crucial moments over and over, trying to understand how his mathematical masterpiece had crumbled into chaos. But this story didn't begin in a sewer pipe with police sirens wailing overhead. It began 3 years ago when Victor Nakamura died, and something far more dangerous was born. But to understand how a homeless man could walk away with $82 million in 4 days, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to when Victor Santos was still Victor Nakamura, Chief Financial Officer of Meridian National Bank, with a corner office on the 42nd floor and a salary that could buy most people's houses twice over. 3 years earlier, Victor had discovered something that would destroy his life and eventually lead him to that warehouse. Hidden deep in Meridian's quarterly reports were discrepancies that didn't add up. Millions of dollars flowing through accounts that shouldn't exist, traced to shell companies that led nowhere. When he brought his concerns to the board of directors, they thanked him for his diligence and assured him they would investigate. 2 weeks later, Victor found himself accused of embezzling those same millions. The evidence was fabricated but convincing. Bank records showing transfers to his personal accounts, email chains that had been doctored to show him authorizing the suspicious transactions, even security footage that had been edited to place him in the server room during times he could prove. He was elsewhere. But proof didn't matter when the entire board was invested in making him disappear. The trial was swift and brutal. Victor's assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed, his wife divorced him, and his legal fees consumed every penny he had saved. When the jury returned a guilty verdict, Victor felt something break inside him that went deeper than heartbreak or anger. It was the cold, calculating fury of a man who realized that justice wasn't blind. It was bought and paid for. But Victor had always been exceptionally good with numbers, and during his 18 months in federal prison, he spent every waking hour calculating. Not just the mathematics of compound interest or risk assessment, but the intricate equations of revenge. He studied every detail of the case against him, memorized every name on the board, traced every connection between Meridian Bank and the shadow network of money laundering that had actually stolen those millions. When he was released, Victor made a choice that would have seemed insane to anyone who knew the man he used to be. Instead of trying to rebuild his life, he disappeared. Victor Nakamura died, and Victor Santos was born on the streets of Chicago, carrying nothing but a backpack full of notebooks filled with 3 years of meticulous planning. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its complexity. Victor would use his intimate knowledge of banking systems, combined with society's tendency to completely ignore homeless people, to execute the perfect heist. But this wouldn't be just about money. This would be about exposing the corruption that had destroyed his life and the lives of countless others. The first part of the plan required Victor to become genuinely homeless. This wasn't a temporary disguise or an act he could turn on and off. For 6 months, he lived in shelters, ate at soup kitchens, and learned the invisible network of survival that exists in every major city. He let his hair grow long and unkempt, allowed his clothes to become tattered and stained, and cultivated the slight hunch and downward gaze that made him virtually invisible to anyone wearing a business suit. During this time, Victor also began recruiting his team, but he didn't find them in the criminal underworld or through underground contacts. He found them in the very shelters and street corners where he now lived. Each member of his team was chosen not for their criminal expertise, but for their intelligence, their personal connection to the financial institutions that had destroyed them, and their desperate need for justice. Victor found Mara on a Tuesday evening at the McDonald's on West Madison, her laptop screen reflecting the fluorescent lights as she typed furiously on yet another job application. He bought 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her, Victor started simple. That's impressive security software you're running, he said, nodding at her laptop. Mara looked up suspiciously. Old habits. I used to work in cybersecurity before everything went to shit. Meridian Bank? Victor asked quietly. Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. How did you know that? Because I know what really happened to you, Victor said. The security breach you discovered wasn't accidental. They fired you because you found something they didn't want found. That's insane, Mara replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Over 3 weeks of coffee meetings, Victor gradually revealed his research. The breach you reported was never fixed, he told her during their 5th conversation. Check the logs if you still have access. Same vulnerability, same entry points, but now it's being used by the executives who fired you. Mara had checked. Her face went pale when she confirmed what Victor already knew. 3 of your former bosses bought houses worth more than their annual salary 6 months after you were fired, Victor continued. All cash purchases. All traced back to accounts connected to that breach you discovered. What do you want from me? Mara asked. I want to show the world what they really did to you, Victor said. But I need someone who understands their systems from the inside. This sounds like you're planning something illegal. I'm planning to expose something illegal, Victor corrected. The question is whether you want to watch them get away with it, or whether you want to help me prove what they did. Mara stared at her coffee for a long moment. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me access their systems. Help me document the truth. Help me make sure they lose everything they stole from you and from everyone else. And then what happens to us? Then the truth comes out, Victor said, and sometimes that's worth more than safety. Mara closed her laptop. When do we start? Victor found Jack Morrison at a VA medical center, emerging from a PTSD counseling session with barely controlled rage. Victor was waiting in the lobby with a newspaper when Jack walked past. Difficult to trust a system that's already betrayed you once? Victor said without looking up from his paper. Jack stopped. Do I know you? You should, Victor replied. I've been following your case for 3 years. Treasury Department buried your investigation into money laundering operations, then transferred you to nowhere until you quit. Who the hell are you? Someone who knows that your investigation was buried because it was getting too close to the truth, Victor said. Someone who knows that the corruption you found goes deeper than you realized. Jack sat down across from him. What do you know about my investigation? I know about the offshore accounts you traced. I know about the shell companies. I know about the federal officials who were paid to make your work disappear, Victor said. Most importantly, I know you were right about everything. Prove it. Victor slid a manila folder across the table. Your former colleagues have been accessing your old investigation files, deleting evidence, altering records, using your work to protect the same networks you were trying to expose. Jack opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. His jaw tightened. How did you get these? I've been building a case for 3 years, Victor said, but I need someone with your training to help me complete the mission. What mission? The one you started at Treasury. Expose the network. Document the corruption. Make them pay for what they've done. Jack closed the folder. This is vigilante justice. This is completing an investigation that should have been completed years ago, Victor replied. The question is whether you want to let them win or whether you want to finish what you started. What's the plan? Infiltrate their operation, gather evidence, expose everything, Victor said. It's dangerous work, but you've done dangerous work before. Jack was quiet for a long moment. When do we move? Victor found Lola Chen in the public library's computer lab, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she worked on freelance programming contracts under false identities. Impressive code, Victor said, glancing at her screen. Self-modifying encryption protocols, military-grade stuff. Lola minimized her windows. Can I help you? Maybe we can help each other, Victor said, sitting down at the adjacent computer. I know about your family, about the student loan company that stole their savings. How could you possibly know about that? Because the same people who stole from your family have been stealing from everyone, Victor replied. The student loan company wasn't an isolated scam. It was part of a network. The FBI investigated. The company was prosecuted. The company was prosecuted, but the money was never recovered, Victor said. Want to know where it went? Lola's typing slowed. Where? Laundered through legitimate banks, invested in real estate. Your parents' life savings are currently generating rental income for the executives who stole it. That's impossible. Victor slid a printout across to her. Bank records, property deeds, corporate filings. Your family's money didn't disappear. It was redistributed to people who specialize in preying on immigrant families. Lola scanned the documents, her face hardening. What do you want? I want to make them pay, Victor said. But I need someone who can coordinate digital communications without being detected. Someone who exists outside the system. You're talking about illegal activity. I'm talking about recovering stolen money and exposing the truth. Victor corrected. The illegal activity already happened. Your family were the victims. What exactly are you planning? An operation to document and expose the network that destroyed your family and countless others, Victor said. It will require careful coordination and real-time intelligence gathering. And if we get caught, then we get caught fighting back instead of accepting that they win, Victor replied. The question is whether you want to spend your life hiding from what they did to you, or whether you want to make sure they can't do it to anyone else. Lola saved her work and closed the programming interface. Tell me more about this operation. Victor never told any of them about the $82 million. He spoke about justice, about exposing corruption, about making the guilty pay for their crimes. Each team member believed they were joining an information-gathering mission that would result in public exposure of wrongdoing. None of them understood they were planning the most sophisticated heist in federal history. Victor recruited them as victims seeking justice, knowing that by the time they realized what they were really doing, they would be too invested to abandon the mission. They thought they were joining a war against corruption. They didn't realize they were about to become criminals in the eyes of the law. At least not until it was too late to turn back. The beauty of Victor's plan was that it relied on a fundamental truth about modern society. Homeless people are essentially invisible. Security guards see them as a nuisance to be moved along. Bank employees see them as a problem for someone else to handle. And the general public sees them as evidence of social problems they'd rather not think about. This invisibility would be Victor's greatest weapon. The target was the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, but not the main vault that everyone would expect. Victor's plan focused on the currency processing center, where damaged and worn bills were supposed to be destroyed and replaced with fresh currency. The facility processed millions of dollars every day, and Victor had discovered something during his research that made it the perfect target. The money being destroyed wasn't always actually destroyed. A small percentage of it was being diverted through a complex network of false documentation, shell companies, and corrupt officials. The money would be reported as destroyed in the official records, but actually shipped to various locations where it would be cleaned, sorted, and eventually reintroduced into circulation through legitimate businesses that were actually fronts for money laundering operations. Victor's plan wasn't to steal from the government. It was to steal from the criminals who were stealing from the government. The $82 million he planned to take was money that was already supposed to be destroyed. Money that, according to the official records, no longer existed. The first day of the operation began at 5:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in November. Victor had been volunteering at a homeless shelter for 3 months, gradually building the trust and reputation that would give him access to the city's volunteer placement program. When the shelter coordinator mentioned that the Federal Reserve was looking for volunteers to help with a community outreach program, Victor was the first to sign up. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same institution that had helped destroy his life was now welcoming him through the front door because his current appearance triggered their diversity and community engagement initiatives. The volunteer program was designed to help homeless individuals gain work experience by doing simple tasks like cleaning, sorting documents, and basic maintenance under close supervision. Victor's supervisor was a young woman named Jennifer, who clearly viewed her assignment to manage homeless volunteers as a step down from her previous role in customer relations. She explained his duties with the patronizing tone of someone speaking to a child, pointing out the cleaning supplies, the areas he was responsible for, and the importance of not touching anything that didn't directly relate to his assigned tasks. "So you'll be working the evening shift Tuesday through Friday," Jennifer said, checking her clipboard with exaggerated importance. "We start at 6 p.m. when the day staff finishes up, and you'll be done by midnight. That gives you plenty of time to clean the main floors without interfering with normal operations." Victor nodded humbly. "What about the upper floors? The ones with all the machinery?" "Oh, that's the currency processing center," Jennifer replied with the slight pride of someone explaining something important to someone she assumed wouldn't understand. That's where we handle the damaged bills that get sent back from banks across the region. Very secure area. You won't be going up there. Damaged bills? Victor asked, maintaining his tone of innocent curiosity. Currency that's too worn or damaged to stay in circulation, Jennifer explained. Gets sorted, counted, and then destroyed according to federal protocols. We process about 4 shipments a week. Usually Monday and Thursday are the big days when the trucks come in from the district banks. Victor pretended to struggle with the concept. And they just throw the money away? Jennifer laughed condescendingly. Not exactly thrown away. Everything gets recorded, documented, and then the bills are shredded and incinerated. Very strict procedures. The waste processing happens every Thursday evening after the sorting is complete, usually around 8 p.m. That's when the disposal trucks come to pick up the destroyed currency containers. Must be a lot of paperwork for all that money, Victor said, pushing his cart a little closer to the restricted access door. Oh yes, mountains of it, Jennifer confirmed. Every bill has to be accounted for. Serial numbers recorded, batch numbers logged, shipping manifests updated. The computer system tracks everything automatically, but we still have to do manual counts, especially on Wednesdays when we prepare the Thursday shipments. That's always our biggest workday. Victor noticed the keycard scanner next to the elevator. What's that red light mean? Oh, that just means restricted access, Jennifer said dismissively. Red means employee access only. Yellow means supervisor level. Green means general access. You'll only need green areas for your cleaning work. The yellow and red zones are for financial processing staff only. And if someone needs to get into a red zone, well, they'd need the proper clearance level programmed into their access card, Jennifer explained, clearly enjoying her role as the expert. Plus, we have additional security protocols on weekends and after 9 p.m. on weekdays. The system automatically locks down all non-essential areas. Victor absorbed this information while appearing to focus on organizing his cleaning supplies. What happens if the cleaning cart needs to go upstairs? Like if there's a spill or something. Emergency cleaning requests go through the security desk, Jennifer said. They'd issue you a temporary access code, usually a 4-digit number that changes daily. Today's emergency access code is 7293, but you won't need it for routine work. 7293, Victor repeated slowly, as if trying to memorize it. That's a lot to remember. Don't worry about it, Jennifer said with a wave. Like I said, you won't be going into any restricted areas. Just stick to the main lobby, the employee break rooms, and the administrative offices on floors 2 and 3. Nice and simple. Victor noticed a schedule posted on the wall behind Jennifer's desk. Those truck times, are they always the same? Pretty much, Jennifer confirmed, glancing at the schedule. Monday deliveries arrive at 10 a.m., processing runs until Thursday afternoon, and disposal pickup is always Thursday at 8:15 p.m. sharp. Very predictable schedule. Makes it easier for security to plan their rotations. Security rotations? Oh yes, we have guards stationed at different posts throughout the day, Jennifer explained. Shift change happens at 7 p.m. and again at 11 p.m. During shift changes, there's usually a 15-minute window where coverage is lighter while the guards do their handoff briefings. Victor nodded as if this was all routine information. And the cameras? What about them? Just wondering if they're always watching. Don't want to accidentally clean something I shouldn't. Jennifer smiled patronizingly. The cameras are always recording, but the monitoring station is only actively staffed during business hours. After 7 p.m., it's mostly automated systems unless there's an alert. Just do your job properly and you won't have any problems. Automated systems, Victor repeated thoughtfully. Motion sensors, door alarms, that sort of thing, Jennifer clarified. The real security is in the restricted areas where you won't be working anyway. The main floors are pretty standard. Clean during your shift, lock up when you leave, and don't touch anything that isn't trash or surfaces that need cleaning. Victor tested one more angle. What if I finish early some night? Early? Jennifer looked skeptical. This job should take you the full 6 hours. But if you somehow finish ahead of schedule, just let security know, and they'll sign you out. Never leave without checking out. That's automatic termination. Security desk is always staffed. 1 guard at the main desk, 1 doing rounds, Jennifer confirmed. The desk guard handles sign-outs and monitors the access logs. Standard procedure. Nothing complicated. What Jennifer didn't know was that Victor was memorizing every detail of the building's layout, noting the location of security cameras, identifying the keycard access points, and cataloging the daily routines of every employee he encountered. His janitor's cart became a mobile surveillance station, allowing him to move through restricted areas without question, as long as he appeared to be working. The currency processing center was exactly as Victor had expected from his research. Massive machines sorted through millions of bills, identifying damaged currency that would be removed from circulation. The damaged bills were supposed to be shredded and incinerated, but Victor quickly identified the discrepancies in the process that confirmed his suspicions about the money laundering operation. Certain batches of damaged currency were being diverted before reaching the destruction phase. The bills weren't actually damaged. They were simply marked for destruction in the computer system while being physically rerouted to a separate processing area. From there, they were packaged and shipped as destroyed currency waste to what appeared to be a disposal facility, but which Victor's research had revealed was actually a front company. During his first day, Victor managed to access the shipping schedules and confirmed that a major shipment of destroyed currency waste was scheduled for Thursday morning. This gave him exactly 3 days to execute his plan. That evening, Victor met with his team at an abandoned subway maintenance tunnel that Mara had discovered during her exploration of the city's underground networks. The location was perfect, completely off the grid, with multiple escape routes, and far enough from any legitimate activity that they could speak freely. Victor began by explaining the layout of the Federal Reserve building, using hand-drawn maps that were more detailed than most architectural blueprints. He'd spent weeks memorizing every detail, from the location of security cameras to the timing of guard rotations. The team spent hours reviewing the plan, with each member understanding not just their own role, but how their actions would affect everyone else's success. Mara's role was perhaps the most complex. She would need to gain access to the building's computer systems without triggering any security alerts. Victor had identified a weakness in the volunteer program. The temporary access cards issued to volunteers like him were linked to a secondary security system that had fewer monitoring protocols than the main employee network. Mara would pose as a volunteer coordinator from the shelter, using forged credentials that Victor had prepared months in advance. Jack's military background made him perfect for the physical security aspects of the plan. He would pose as a maintenance worker for the private company that serviced the building's HVAC systems. Victor had spent weeks studying the company's procedures, and had even managed to acquire a uniform and identification badge through a complex series of identity thefts that left no trail back to him or his team. Lola's youth and computer skills made her the perfect inside operative. She would continue her legitimate volunteer work at the shelter while also serving as the team's communications hub and digital security expert. Her role was to monitor police frequencies, track any unusual activity around the building, and maintain the encrypted communication system that would allow the team to coordinate their activities. The second day began with Mara's infiltration of the building's computer systems. Posing as Sarah Martinez, a volunteer coordinator from the Westside Community Shelter, she arrived at the Federal Reserve Building at 7:30 a.m. with a clipboard full of volunteer applications and a story about expanding the program to include data entry work for homeless individuals with office experience. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced at her credentials before issuing her a temporary access card and directing her to the volunteer coordination office. Mara's appearance was carefully calculated, professional enough to avoid suspicion, but not so polished that she would stand out. She wore a slightly worn business suit from a thrift store, carried a battered laptop bag, and had practiced the slightly hairy demeanor of someone managing too many social service programs with too little funding. Once inside the building, Mara began the delicate process of accessing the computer systems without triggering security protocols. The Volunteer Coordination Office shared a network with the building's main security system, but the access controls were designed to prevent unauthorized access from outside the building, not from someone who was already inside with legitimate credentials. Mara's first task was to identify the specific computers and access points that controlled the currency processing systems. This required her to physically locate several different terminals throughout the building, carefully mapping the network architecture while appearing to conduct routine volunteer coordination activities. Meanwhile, Victor continued his role as a cleaning volunteer, but with a much more specific focus. He needed to identify the exact timing and location of the currency diversion process, and he needed to find a way to redirect one of the shipments designated for destruction. The currency processing center operated on a precise schedule. Damaged bills were sorted and processed in batches throughout the day, with the final processed batches being prepared for shipment each evening. Victor discovered that the diverted currency was being removed from the main processing line at 3:17 p.m. each day, during a shift change when supervision was at its minimum. The diverted bills were taken to a separate processing room where they were repackaged for shipment. The room was labeled as a waste processing center, but Victor could see that the bills being prepared for shipment were not actually damaged. They were simply being removed from circulation to be reintroduced elsewhere in the money laundering network. Victor's plan required him to replace one of these shipments with a different batch of currency, specifically a batch that contained bills marked with traceable serial numbers that would allow law enforcement to track them back to their source. But first, he needed to confirm exactly how much money was being diverted in each shipment. That evening, Victor returned to the tunnel to share his discoveries with the team. The shipments contained approximately $20 million each, and there were scheduled to be 4 shipments over the next 2 days. This meant that Victor could potentially intercept up to $80 million, money that was already supposed to be destroyed and wouldn't be missed from the official records. But the plan required perfect timing and coordination. Victor would need to access the waste processing room during the narrow window when the diverted currency was being prepared for shipment. Mara would need to alter the shipping records to redirect one of the shipments to a location under their control. Jack would need to intercept the shipment before it reached its intended destination. And Lola would need to monitor all police and security frequencies to ensure that their activities didn't trigger any unexpected responses. The third day was when the plan moved from preparation to execution. Victor arrived at the Federal Reserve Building early, before his scheduled volunteer shift, and used his knowledge of the building's schedule to access areas that would normally be off-limits. The early morning hours were perfect because most of the security staff was focused on preparing for the day's activities rather than monitoring routine cleaning and maintenance work. Victor's first task was to locate the specific shipment that he would intercept. The waste processing room contained several pallets of packaged destroyed currency, each labeled with shipping information that indicated its intended destination. Victor had memorized the fake company names and addresses that were part of the money laundering network, and he quickly identified the shipment that was scheduled to leave the building that afternoon. But Victor's plan went beyond simply stealing the money. He had spent months preparing evidence that would expose the entire money laundering operation. Hidden in his janitor's cart were high-resolution cameras that could document the currency diversion process, recording the serial numbers of bills that were supposed to be destroyed but were actually being shipped to criminal organizations. While Victor documented the evidence, Mara was executing the most technically challenging part of the plan. She had gained access to the building's shipping and inventory systems and was carefully altering the records for one of the currency shipments. The changes had to be subtle enough to avoid immediate detection, but comprehensive enough to redirect $20 million to a warehouse that Jack had rented under a false identity. The warehouse was located in an industrial district where truck traffic was common and security was minimal. Jack had spent weeks establishing his cover identity as the owner of a small packaging company, creating a paper trail that would withstand casual investigation but wouldn't hold up under serious scrutiny. The plan didn't require the cover to last long, just long enough for them to complete their mission. Lola's role on the third day was to monitor all electronic communications related to the Federal Reserve Building and to track any unusual activity that might indicate that their plan had been discovered. She had established monitoring stations at 3 different locations around the city, using her skills to intercept and decode police radio traffic, security company communications, and even cell phone conversations from key personnel at the building. At 2:45 p.m., Victor made his move. The currency processing center was in the middle of a shift change, with the day crew finishing their final batch processing and the evening crew preparing to take over. Victor had timed his approach to coincide with the 15-minute window when supervision was at its minimum and access to the waste processing room would be possible. Victor entered the room wearing the maintenance coveralls that Jack had provided, carrying a work order that Mara had generated through the building's work order system. To any casual observer, he appeared to be a maintenance worker responding to a routine request to check the air conditioning unit in the waste processing room. The room contained exactly what Victor had expected. 4 pallets of currency that had been diverted from the destruction process, each containing approximately $20 million. The bills were packaged in industrial shipping containers that were labeled as destroyed currency waste, but which actually contained perfectly usable money that was being stolen from the government and used to fund criminal enterprises. Victor's documentation of the scene was thorough and methodical. He photographed each pallet, recorded the serial numbers of sample bills from each container, and documented the shipping labels that would allow law enforcement to trace the money's intended destination. But he also did something else. He planted GPS tracking devices on 3 of the 4 pallets, devices that would allow authorities to track the shipments to their final destinations and identify the entire network of criminal organizations involved in the money laundering operation. Then Victor made the substitution that was the heart of his plan. Using a hand truck that he had positioned in the room earlier, he removed one of the pallets and replaced it with a pallet of genuine destroyed currency that he had prepared over the past several days. The substitution was nearly invisible. The replacement pallet was identical in size and weight to the original, and the shipping labels were perfect replicas of the originals. The pallet that Victor removed contained exactly $20 million. But according to the official records, that money had already been destroyed and no longer existed. This meant that Victor could steal it without technically stealing from the government. He was stealing from the criminals who had already stolen it from the government. Victor moved the stolen pallet to a service elevator that provided access to the building's loading dock. The timing was critical. The loading dock was staffed during normal business hours, but there was a brief window during the evening shift change when the area was unmonitored. At exactly 4:23 p.m., Victor wheeled the pallet onto the loading dock and transferred it to a delivery truck that Jack was driving in his maintenance worker disguise. The truck was painted with the logo of a legitimate janitorial supply company, and Jack's paperwork indicated that he was picking up industrial waste for disposal. The transfer took less than 3 minutes. To anyone watching, it appeared to be a routine waste pickup. Jack drove the truck to the warehouse, where he and Victor spent the next 2 hours transferring the money to a more secure location and beginning the process of documenting every bill for eventual use as evidence. But Victor's plan was far from complete. The money was just one part of a larger strategy that would expose the corruption and bring justice to those who had destroyed his life and the lives of countless others. The 4th day was when everything came together. Victor arrived at the Federal Reserve Building for what would be his final day as a volunteer, but his real purpose was to complete the evidence gathering that would make the case against the money laundering operation irrefutable. Mar had spent the night making final adjustments to the building's computer systems, carefully planting evidence that would lead investigators to the truth about the currency diversion scheme. She had also created a comprehensive digital record of all the financial transactions, shell companies, and corrupt officials involved in the operation. Jack had moved the stolen money to its final location, not a hiding place where they planned to keep it, but a staging area where it would be discovered by law enforcement along with all the evidence that Victor had compiled over the past 3 years. Lola had established communication with a team of investigative journalists and FBI agents who had been working on related cases involving financial corruption. Victor had spent months identifying law enforcement officials who were not part of the corruption network and who could be trusted to act on the evidence he was providing. At 11:30 a.m., Victor triggered the final phase of his plan. Using his access to the building's communication systems, he sent an anonymous tip to the FBI office in Chicago, providing them with the exact location of the warehouse where the stolen money was hidden, along with detailed information about the money laundering operation and the location of additional evidence. But Victor didn't just send the tip and disappear. He had planned for his own arrest as the final piece of evidence that would convince authorities to take his claim seriously. A homeless man with $82 million would attract attention in a way that an anonymous tip might not. At 2:15 p.m., Victor walked out of the Federal Reserve Building carrying a maintenance cart that contained exactly $4 million, money that he had kept separate from the main theft as proof of his claims. He had chosen this amount carefully. It was enough to guarantee his arrest and ensure that the case would be treated as a major crime, but not so much that it would bankrupt him to pay it back when the truth was revealed. Victor walked slowly down the street, making no attempt to hide or escape. He had calculated exactly how long it would take for authorities to track him down, and he positioned himself to be arrested at a location that would lead them directly to the warehouse where the rest of the money was hidden. When Detective Sarah Chen and her team arrested Victor, he offered no resistance. He simply smiled and told them that they would find the rest of the money at the address he provided, along with evidence that would expose the largest financial crime in federal banking history. The warehouse contained not just the $78 million that Victor had stolen, but also 3 years' worth of meticulously documented evidence showing how corrupt officials at multiple banks and government agencies had been using the currency destruction process to steal money from the government and launder it through criminal organizations. Victor's notebooks contained detailed financial records, copies of falsified documents, photographs of the currency diversion process, and a complete organizational chart of the money laundering network. He had also prepared written statements from other victims of the scheme and had compiled evidence of dozens of related cases where individuals had been falsely accused of crimes to cover up the real corruption. But the most compelling evidence was the GPS tracking devices that Victor had planted on the remaining pallets of diverted currency. When authorities activated the tracking devices, they were able to follow the money to its final destinations and arrest the entire network of criminals involved in the operation. The case broke open like a dam bursting. Within 72 hours of Victor's arrest, federal agents had arrested 43 individuals involved in the money laundering scheme, including board members from 3 major banks, federal employees from multiple agencies, and organized crime, figures who had been considered untouchable. Detective Sarah Chen found herself at the center of the biggest case of her career, but she was also dealing with a suspect who didn't fit any profile she'd ever encountered. Victor wasn't trying to avoid prosecution. He was actively helping with the investigation, providing additional evidence and connecting the dots between different aspects of the criminal network. It took Detective Sarah Chen 3 days to understand that she hadn't arrested a criminal. She'd arrested a victim who'd spent 3 years building the perfect case against his destroyers. Victor Santos was actually Victor Chen Nakamura, the falsely convicted bank executive who'd orchestrated his own capture because he knew that anonymous tips get buried, but a homeless man with $82 million gets headlines. He'd calculated every detail with mathematical precision, from the timing of the heist to his arrest location, creating a situation where the evidence couldn't be ignored or suppressed. The plan worked perfectly. The money laundering network was dismantled, corrupt officials were prosecuted, and Victor's original conviction was overturned when the falsified evidence against him was exposed. Victor Chen Nakamura walked out of the federal courthouse a free man, his reputation restored and his sacrifice vindicated. The homeless man who'd stolen $82 million had become the hero who'd saved hundreds of millions more.